Well, hey everybody, my name is Devin Knight. I'm the president of Pragmatic Works Training, and I'm here with you with what I think will be a kind of exciting video, in that I'm going to have a little bit of a time challenge, but we're also going to look at what we can do to build a Power BI solution in a short amount of time. If you're anything like many beginners, you struggle a little bit with how to get started with Power BI and Power BI solutions when given a project. You might be given a very raw form of data, and then you're left to figure out what to do with it. So in this video, we're going to take on that challenge, and in under 60 minutes, we're going to set a timer even, we're going to figure out how we can start with essentially nothing other than just a set of data and some problems, and walk through the process that a Power BI developer would go through to figure out how to solve or build a solution in a short amount of time. 60 minutes, we're not going to be able to make it perfect, of course, but we're going to go through that process, so hopefully you can see what I'm thinking. And it'll be pretty low edits here because we're going to be really kind of focusing in on the process and what is my brain thinking about as I'm given this challenge. Now, to give you a little bit of peek at what we're going to be doing, I want to show you now the end result of what we're going to have at the end of this video, so you can have a little bit of a picture of what the final product's going to look like, which of course is going to be a set of reports, some graphs, some maps, not maps, excuse me, there's no maps in this data, but we're going to be able to see what kind of data, what kind of reports we can form with this use case. We're going to be looking at a customer service use case here today. And as you can see here, we're going to be building out some reports showing things on tickets and our customers and the agents that are supporting those tickets and how fast we're able to solve the problems that our customers put into our customer service solution that we have. Now that you've seen the end result, let's walk through the process that it's going to take to actually build out a solution like that. Let's start our timer now. And with our timer started, we're going to begin our process. The process with any Power BI solution or any data solution you should really start with is a set of questions that you want answered. And this will help you a lot as you get started with your Power BI projects. And one, thinking, does your data even support the questions that you're trying to answer? And really giving you some ideas of how you're going to break up the data over time. Let's start off with a couple questions that we have about our data. This is customer service data. So because it's customer service data, we want to ask about things like our tickets. So first question I want to know is, on average, how quickly are we resolving tickets that are sent into our support system? Okay, so that's good to know. That's one of our questions. I also want to know, how many tickets do we currently have open? So how many open tickets are looming that are waiting for our agents to work on? I also want to know which agents have the highest customer satisfaction score from each of the customers that they work with. Finally, what kind of customers are generating the most tickets? So where are our tickets coming from? Are they coming from some of our high priority customers or elsewhere? So you start off with these 3 to 5 questions. In this case, I have 4 questions I want answered with the data. And then of course, you'll examine the data to see if the data that you have supports that. But before you even jump into that, you should look at the questions, because oftentimes these questions are coming from your business users, and you should look at these questions to see if you can break down where your metrics are, because this is going to help you as you get started with your Power BI solution to find these are the individual metrics that you're working with, and these are the descriptive attributes that you're working with. But let's first start with the metrics. So as you look at this, you should likely spot these metrics. How quickly, so it's an element of time. How many tickets, so a number of tickets. Customer satisfaction, that's going to be some kind of score that we have. What kind of customers are generating the most tickets? Again, that's number of tickets. So it looks like at a glance what we have is, how long did it take to close a ticket? How many tickets, which is the second and fourth question. And then what is our customer satisfaction score? So those are going to be our metrics that we care about as we work through our Power BI solution. Now, the attributes are going to be the things that describe those metrics. As you look at the screen here, we can see that I have the attributes of resolving tickets. So resolving tickets, that means there's some kind of field that describes the resolution. Was it resolved? Is it open still? Is it closed? Is it in a certain status? That status is going to determine whether a ticket is resolved or not, or if it's opened or not. The second one, how many tickets do we currently have open? That's, again, that resolution status. What's the status of a ticket? And then we can also ask things about the agents. So agents describe the satisfaction of a ticket. So who is the person that worked on a ticket? That's an agent here, a customer service agent. And then finally, what kind of customers being the descriptive attribute there, are generating the most tickets. So that's what we want to kind of look at as we're going through these, is these are our dimension data and what are essentially called fact data or metric data we're going to be looking at. Why is it important to separate those things out in your mind this early? Well, it's going to help you when it comes to data modeling and building out your solution and organizing the solution you're working with. And I'll show you here what our current data looks like, because that's going to help us understand what we're going to have to do to the data to organize it in a certain way. It is a spreadsheet, a CSV file, in fact, that is just simply a list of tickets that we're working with. So we have a ticket ID, we have information about the customer, we have the status of the ticket, when it was created, when it was assigned, when it was resolved, who did it, who worked on the ticket, who the agent was, what team were they part of, customer satisfaction, how quickly they responded, and then what the final resolution was. So we had status and resolution, kind of two different things here. So we have this flattened view of data, and a lot of people will take this flattened view of data and immediately bring it into Power BI and start building things on top of it. That's probably fine for beginners, but what a lot of people that have worked with Power BI for some time realize is your data never stays this simple. You're going to have new things that get added. You're going to have lots and lots of rows that come in eventually. This is the very small data set as it sits right now. It's only a couple hundred rows. But over time, this is going to continue to grow. It's also going to get more complex over time. So we want to plan for that complexity that's eventually going to come. Because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to reorganize that data so that it's better suited for Power BI into a more traditional star schema. So a star schema kind of brings into this idea of facts and dimensions. Dimensions are going to store your descriptive data, whereas facts are typically going to store your metric data. When you work on this, you want to have that metric data at your lowest possible granularity, meaning the most detailed view of the data you're possibly going to want. If you are going to want something to go down to a very low line item, then that's the level of granularity that you need to have in your fact table. What does that look like for our example here? We've talked about the questions and what kind of metrics and attributes that we want to use to describe those metrics are. How do we model that into a proper star schema or a design in our data model? Well, it's going to look something like this, and I recommend that you actually draw it out. Get out a piece of paper, go to a whiteboard, and plan it out and draw it out on your own. Because in our case, we're going to start with our fact table or our metric data. And the lowest level of granularity that we're talking about in our use case is going to be a ticket. Each row that we saw within inside of that spreadsheet or that CSV file I showed you a moment ago was at the level of a ticket. So our fact table is going to be at the level of a ticket. A ticket is going to allow us to count the tickets. We're going to be able to see the customer satisfaction by ticket. That's kind of the lowest level of granularity, and that's going to be also where all of our metric data is going to be found. Can the ticket also be a dimension in some cases? It could, because you're going to have things that describe the ticket, like the status and the resolution and things like that. So there are some cases where you can have a fact table also serve as a dimension, but we're going to keep things a little simple here just with the time that we have. But our metric data is going to be stored within inside of the ticket table. Then we're going to branch off from that several dimension tables, starting with an agents table. An agents table is going to have the descriptive attributes on who worked on a ticket. So who was the individual support engineer that worked on the ticket? They're going to be stored in the agents table. We're also interested in looking at the customer table. The customer table is going to tell us information, of course, about the customer that filed the ticket. It's going to tell us what company they're with. It's also going to tell us what kind of industry they're in and what kind of support contract perhaps maybe that they might have. I don't think that information is stored in this data set, but that's something that could be added to it over time potentially. And what you'll find is with most dimensional models and most star schemas is you're likely going to also have a date table. A date table is almost standard with any kind of Power BI data model that you're going to be designing. You should almost always have one because really dates are so important to the analysis of your data that you're working with. It's probably a very rare scenario where you're not going to have a date dimension because you're going to want to analyze things on when a ticket was created and how many tickets were created this quarter and this year and that sort of thing. So date is a very common and popular kind of dimension that you'll likely have within inside of your scenario. Now, whenever you think about this, I've kind of drawn these out. These are all going to relate back to the fact table. So they're going to have relationships, many to one or one to many relationships back to the fact table. A one to many relationship means that I can have one agent within inside of my agent table that relates back to many instances of tickets that that agent worked on. Or I have one customer inside my customer table who files multiple support tickets within inside of my tickets table. So that's what a one-to-many is. There's one instance of that agent to many tickets that agent worked on within inside of the other side of the relationship. Now, part of the reason why you want to be able to design a model like this is for long-term support. We talked about that a few moments ago. But also, it's going to be for considering other things that you're eventually going to add into your solutions long-term. So while we might be looking at tickets right now, and that kind of looks something like this, right? We have our tickets table and it's related to agents, to customers, to date. Long-term, we might integrate other elements and other metric type data that has nothing to do with tickets as part of the solution long-term. So just to give you a little example, long-term, I might also want to add in service contracts. So service contracts are going to relate back to a customer still. It's going to have relationships back to date, but it might also integrate in new dimensions like a salesperson. Salesperson has nothing to do with closing tickets, but they do have something to do with selling that contract. And so that's another reason why it's oftentimes important to do this dimensional model, because you can have shared resources, in this case, shared dimensions, where the customer and the date dimension both work with inside of the tickets in scenario, but they also work with inside of the service contract scenario as well. So that dimension can be shared across multiple fact tables or multiple metric tables here. All right, so now that we've gotten this little bit of a picture of what we want to do, let's actually get started a little bit with inside of the tool. This is some of the effort that goes into it, the pre-planning that goes into it ahead of time. So let's close this out and let's go ahead and open up the Power BI desktop. So I'm going to launch the Power BI desktop here. And the first thing that we're going to obviously do is connect into our data source. The data source that we're using for this example, I will be providing. You can download it on your own. You'll find it in the description of this video. It is a very simple CSV file. So it's not a lot of complexity to it. It is a simple file that we're going to be using. And as we use that file, we're going to be breaking it down into those dimension and fact tables that we just diagrammed a few moments ago with inside of our presentation a moment ago. So to get started though, we're going to go ahead and open up the Power BI desktop, which we've done here. And we're going to begin by connecting into our data. To connect into our data, we're going to use the Get Data button up in the top left-hand corner right here. And inside of the Get Data section, we can select the type of data source we're going to connect into. Now, there's several different data sources that you can find listed here, but there's a much larger list of them if you click More. Now, in our scenario, I don't need to go to the much larger list. I can see text/CSV file right here. That's the type that we want to work with, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. All right, once we do that, I will go find the data that we're going to be using for this example. I have stored it just simply on my C drive in a data folder. I will point out this is a little bit relevant because I'm going to provide my files to you, including my completed solution. And if you open up my completed solution and you don't store this customer service data file in the same location, the C:\data, whenever you go to open my completed example, it won't refresh. So it'll only refresh if you happen to have this data in the exact same place. So you may want to replicate that, just pointing that out. All right, but we're going to go ahead and select the customer service data file here and hit open. So once this is going to connect into our file, you'll see a little preview of the data that we're about to be working with. Now, in our case, there are some things that we want to do to manipulate the data before we just consume it and start using it. And to do that, we're going to go down to the Load Data button right here. So using Load Data allows us to do some data preparation, to do some data cleansing steps and make sure that we're looking at accurate data. But this is also where we're going to go to attempt to split out and form our dimensional model. Remember, we talked about a tickets table and an agents table and a customer table and a date table. We're going to do that by going into the Transform Data button here, which is going to launch the Power Query Editor. So Power Query Editor is now launched. We're going to spend some time in here now. So let's take our time. And what we're going to begin to do is actually some simple stuff where we want to split out our table into just focusing in on customers and agents and eventually a date table as well. What I want to do is I want to create a version of the table we're looking at right now, and I'm going to copy it and duplicate it and then limit it to just show customer data or just show agents data. All right, so to do that, you can come over to the top left here where you see queries, and I'm going to right click on the query and I'm going to duplicate it. Now, you'll notice there's also an option to reference. You don't want to do that because what reference will do is it will actually keep a connection to the original query. In our case, we want to have it completely separated, and so we're going to duplicate. All right, so we're going to go ahead and duplicate the query. You can see I have two queries with the same name. You can't, or close to the same name. You can't have two with the same name. And what I'm going to do with the new query here is I'm going to rename it, and we're going to rename this and call it Agents. All right, so let's get started with agents before we go to work on customers. In our agents query, we're going to go find the attributes here that are related to agents. So if we scroll over to the far right, we should be able to find the information related to agents. We have the agent ID, the agent name, and I am multi-selecting here by holding down Control. So hold down Control and select agent ID, agent name, and team name. Those are really the 4 attributes that we have that are related to agents. So I'm going to multi-select those 3 by holding down Control and clicking each one. And then I'm going to only return back those 3 columns. So if I only want those 3 columns, I can right-click on the header of any one of the 3 that we see right now, and I can select Remove Other Columns. That's going to leave us with just the 3 columns that we care about here. And so that way this forms our dimension having to do with agents. Now, there's a lot of duplicate values likely, or there could be at least some duplicate values found within inside of this. For instance, here, you can see on line 79 and 80 right here, we have 2 records here for Lisa Martinez. And we have 2 records here for Amanda White. Now, if you remember what we talked about earlier, this is going to be part of a one-to-many relationship. One-to-many, this would be the one side of it, means that these are unique or distinct values. And so the agents table is expected to be a unique or distinct list of agents. And so to create this, to make this more of a distinct list, what we can do is we can select the 3 columns that we have, agent ID, agent name, and team name, and then right-click again on any one of those headers, and we're going to remove duplicates. And then that's going to give us a distinct list of agents that we're working with, because again, this is going to form into a one-to-many relationship. Now, some of the things you could optionally do here, you could create something called a surrogate key. A surrogate key would basically be an index column that we add here. It's just a simple 1 to however many rows you have. And then you could relate that back into your fact table, which will eventually be our tickets table. In this case, I'm going to keep the relationship based on the agent ID here. So we have this agent ID already. This is kind of a business key that we're going to be using, and this will eventually relate back to our tickets table once we get that finalized. All right. So now that we have this table, the agents table looks pretty good. I don't think there's any other changes I want to make to it. Let's go back to the customer service data table, our query, and we're going to copy this one. This time, remember, you could right-click and hit duplicate. I'm going to do it a little differently this time. You can do Control-C and Control-V to copy and then paste that query again. So just another way to do the same thing. If you're not comfortable with that, you can right-click and duplicate. In this new one, we're going to go ahead and rename this one. This is going to be our customers table. So let's go ahead and rename this. I'll right-click and rename, and let's call this customers. All right. And our customers table, very similar to what we did with agents. I only want information related to the customers, nothing to do with tickets inside of this new table, our new query. So if I only want customers information, let's go ahead and select the customer column. We'll start with customer ID, customer name, customer type. Oops, let's try that again. Customer segment, and I think that's it. These other ones have to do with tickets. So the channel that the ticket came in from, the category of the ticket, all of those are more ticket-related information. So I only really want these 4 columns related to the customer, and then I'll right-click and we'll remove other columns again, just like we did the first time. So again, the information that's stored inside the customers table should only have to do with customers. We don't need any information related to tickets here. And we're eventually going to make this, again, a distinct list of customers as well. So we're going to remove other columns here. Let's go back to our demo. We're going to remove other columns. And that leaves us with just the 4 that we had selected a moment ago. Just like we did last time, we want to make sure this is a distinct list of customers in case maybe a customer has had more than one ticket. So I'm going to multi-select all of the columns here and then right-click and remove duplicates. Again, there should be a distinct list of customers this time. Should not include multiple values for the same customer. Okay? All right, looking good. So now that we have 2 dimensions, agents and customers, you might be asking, well, how do we get a date table? A date table is a little bit of a different scenario. You can often create a date table on your own, and I'll include this link in the description of the video here. But this is a link to create a date table using Power Query. We're using Power Query right now, and I actually have a blog that I wrote on pragmaticworks.com where you can take from me and steal from me if you want a script that I have written that will actually create a date table for you. So starting right here where it says create date dimension, I'm going to select and scroll down to the end of the script right here, and we'll copy this and bring this over to Power BI. This script will create a multi-column table here for me that describes dates. All I have to do is I have to input into it a start date and an end date. So I tell it when I want it to start, when I want it to end, and it will create a list of dates for me. Again, the reason and the purpose of the date table is because we want to be able to analyze things by date. We want to be able to analyze things by how many tickets were created this quarter, how many were created this year, how many have we closed this year. Those are all things related to date, and if you want to do that properly, you need to have a date table that's part of this. All right, so let's go ahead and take this back over to Power BI, and we're going to create a new blank query this time. You can do that by going up to New Source right here, and we're going to say that we want a blank query. This will allow us to paste in the query that we copied a moment ago from my blog. So let's go ahead and select blank query here. And then once you launch a blank query, we're going to go up to the advanced editor found right here. So the advanced editor will allow you to paste in a query that you have copied from my blog. So I'll go ahead and select advanced editor. All right, now you're going to replace anything that's already in here, get rid of all of that, and we're going to paste in the query that I had on my blog, just like this. And you can see it does look like it picks it up properly. And so we'll hit done once we're done with that. Now we have the opportunity to provide when do we want this date table to begin? When do we want the date table to end? I know that this data all begins with inside of 2025. So I'm going to have it begin on January 1st, 2025. You can also use the date selector there if you prefer. I'm just going to type it in. And then you can really have this end whenever you want. If you want to prepare for the future, you could have it end in 2030 if you wanted to. For simplicity's sake here, I'm going to have it end on the end of the year 2025. Okay? So you're going to provide a start date and an end date and then hit invoke to invoke that function, start that function out. And there it goes. It creates the date table for us. Looks pretty good. Now with that created, I can do a couple things here. I can change data types if I wanted to. Looks like I have some number columns in here that have an odd data type. You can tell the data type, by the way. You'll see this ABC123. That's a generic data type. So if I wanted to modify the data type, let's say you wanted to change all of the number values to numeric, I can multi-select year, week number, month number, and I can change the data type all at once right here by making these all whole numbers. If I wanted to do the same thing for the text columns and the date column, I can select the columns and I can either choose on the data type here in the top left corner of the column, or you can multi-select them and you can change them all together by going up to the data type in the top ribbon. So totally up to you. You can do it in a couple different ways. You could change them individually by hitting the little icon in the top left of the column header, or you can multi-select and change it up top. All right, now we want to give this new table, new query a name. Let's go ahead and rename this. We're going to, you can double click on it to rename it. We're going to call this our dates table, just like so. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back over to our customer service data and we're going to rename this to tickets. So this has everything to do with tickets in it now. However, we will remove some of the columns that we no longer need. We don't need the details of the customer. We'll still need the customer ID because we have to relate it back. But we don't need the customer name type segment. We do want the channel, the category, the priority, the status. Those all have to do with the tickets. Notice which ones I'm multi-selecting here, by the way. So pause me if you want to make sure you get the same columns as me. I'm excluding the customer ones except for the ID. And then I'm going to slide over and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to include all the columns except for, I lost my multi-select. Let's try that again. Ticket, customer ID, channel, category, priority, status. I want all of those. Then come over here. I want the create date, assign date, resolve date, agent ID. I don't want the agent details. I do want the satisfaction and the last couple columns here. All right, so I've multi-selected those columns and then I'm going to right-click on any one of the ones that I've selected and remove other columns. Now you might be asking, why didn't I just do remove columns on the ones I don't want? There is some reasons for that. I wish I could have time to get into the details of that, but it's actually better to do remove other columns rather than remove columns because long-term, if you ever change your mind, remove other columns gives you the ability to edit the columns that you remove. So that's the short answer to why I keep doing remove other columns. All right, so that allows me to see all of the columns that I have now. These are related to tickets, and I think I'm ready to keep moving forward. So those are looking pretty good. Now, one thing I do know that I want to do, and I want to point this out now to save us a little time, I know I'm going to want to relate the created date, this column right here, back to my date table at some point. And you'll notice that the created date column has a time on it, 10:37 a.m. Well, there's going to become a little bit of a problem when I try and create a relationship from this created date back to my date table, which does not have a date time, and it doesn't have a 10:37 time that goes with it. So one thing I know I'm going to need to do as well while I'm here is I'm going to go ahead and change the created date column. Instead of being a date time, I'm going to change it to just be a date. So right now it's a date time, but I only really need the date. I don't care about the time that the ticket was created necessarily. All right, we'll keep the time for the assigned and the resolved date, but for the created date, we're going to remove the time. And this will help us create a relationship back to the date table. With it being a different data type, we wouldn't have not have been able to create that relationship that we'll get to here in a few moments. So that part's important. The one other thing I think I noticed as we were scrolling through here that I want to do is I noticed that on the resolution, this column at the very end, there are some blanks. And what I'd like to do is rather than having blank values, anytime it finds a blank value like that, I want to replace it with a null. So that's fairly simple to do. What we can do is you can right click on the resolution column and we can tell it that we want to replace values right here. When we select replace values, we can tell it that we want to replace the blank, which is, we'll just leave the top blank, and we want to replace it with null. A blank value actually is a real value. A null value is the absence of a value, and that's really what we want to have here. There is no resolution to this yet. All right, so we'll go ahead and hit OK, and you can see the change that made. If you look closely, you can see those blank values now are represented by nulls. Okay, and that'll help us later on. I'm happy with what we've done in the Power Query side of things. Let's now go ahead and bring this into Power BI Desktop. It is in Power BI Desktop, but let's bring it into the data modeling phase of our project. So I'll hit Close and Apply. It's going to bring the results of what we did inside Power Query now into the rest of the desktop tool. And you can see those 4 tables that we brought in are now available over here on the data pane on the far right. You can see agents, customers, date, and tickets all found over on the right-hand side. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is look at the relationships, because it's likely that whenever we brought this data in, not all 4 of those tables were properly related to each other. So we're going to need to do some relationship building. Relationships can be built on the model view that you find right here. So the model view is where you can create a relationship between the tables that you're working with. That's kind of what the little diagram icon represents here. So let's go ahead and select the model view. And you can see when I go to the model view, several of the relationships were automatically created for us. In fact, doesn't this look kind of familiar to you? Minus this one table on the bottom, this should look super familiar. In fact, it's going to look very similar to what we kind of diagrammed early on right here, right? Remember we talked about this idea of our tickets table being our metric table or our fact table, and then it's surrounded by the agents, customers, and date dimensions. Well, that's essentially what we're seeing here, but it's a little bit more detailed with the columns that we're working with now. So the one thing that we are missing is a relationship between our date table and our tickets table. So we'll have to create that ourselves. The way that we're going to create that is by selecting the created date inside the tickets table, and we're going to drag that created date and drop it on the date table inside the date column inside of the date table. And when you drag and drop that, it's going to create a relationship. It's going to pop open and confirm that you want to create a many-to-one relationship. Many-to-one meaning that that same date can have multiple tickets associated with it. But the date table is only going to show the particular date one time. So one instance of the date inside the date table to many instances or many possible instances of that date inside the tickets table. All right, so that looks good. We're going to go ahead and hit save, and it's going to create that relationship here. So now we have relationships between all of our tables, and this looks very similar to the diagram that we had earlier. So relationships are looking good. The other thing that I'd like to do is part of our data modeling step here is I think it would be great to create a hierarchy in our data. There's a couple places we can go to create a hierarchy, but I'm going to go back over to the report view on the top of our screen right here. And if we select the report view inside of the data pane on the far right, we have the ability to create a nice little hierarchy here. That way we can drill into the data. So the purpose of a hierarchy is that it allows you to drill into your data more and more and more. The hierarchy that I want to create is going to be inside the agents table. So inside of the agents table, you can see a pretty natural hierarchy here between the team and the agent. So an agent is part of a team, of course. And so if I want to create a hierarchy, what I recommend doing is you would right-click on the highest level of that hierarchy. So in this case, the highest level of the hierarchy is going to be the team name. So if I right-click on team name, I can select Create Hierarchy. Again, the purpose of a hierarchy is it's going to make it life a little easier for us when we go to our report development. Rather than dragging in both the team name and the agent name separately each time, we'll be able to bring in the hierarchy, and that will include everything that we're going to need with regards to that agent data. So we'll go ahead and select Create Hierarchy. There's the hierarchy now created. And if you expand the hierarchy, you can see right now we have a single column within inside of that hierarchy, and obviously a hierarchy should involve multiple columns. So if we want to add a second column to that hierarchy, we can go over to the agent name, right click on it, and we can add it to the team name hierarchy. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now, one thing you might be asking yourself is you could definitely go through and rename some of these columns. I can rename the hierarchy as well. If I right click on it or click the dots, you can rename this, and I can call this our team hierarchy, for example. So if you want to give it a proper name or a different name, you can. The other thing you may be asking yourself is, what about adding spaces in the column names? You can absolutely do that. I highly recommend adding spaces in the column names. You may even want to hide the agent ID. The agent ID may not be very meaningful to the people using your reports. So you could go through and you could hide some of these columns. You can simply right-click or click the three dots, and you can select hide if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it here, but just wanted you to know that's something you can do as a usability enhancement. You can hide columns in here, and then you could also rename them. It's a little time-consuming to do that. I know we're under a time crunch, so I'm not going to go through renaming and hiding columns. But that's something you can choose to do on your own. In fact, if you do choose to do that, especially hiding columns, I would do that from the model view that we showed earlier, because from the model view, you can actually multi-select columns here, and you can hide more than one column at a time if you wanted to. So I've multi-selected several columns here. You can then right-click and hide them all at once if you wanted to. Here's what I want to do. And you know what? Before we move on, I will hide a couple of the columns, but I'm just going to do it in the tickets table. I'm going to hide the agent ID, the customer ID, and I'm going to leave it just those two columns. I'm going to right-click and hide those. By the way, if you hide them and you realize you made a mistake, you can always come back in here and you can unhide them by clicking on this little icon here. All right? Or you can multi-select and unhide again. All right, so I think our model's looking decent, but I know there's some things that I need to do to satisfy those questions that we had earlier. If you remember earlier, we had some questions around the data that we wanted answered. Those questions were things like, on average, how many tickets are we resolving? How many tickets do we currently have open? Which agents are getting the highest customer satisfaction? What kinds of customers are generating the most tickets? Things like that. So because we know some of the questions that we're going to have about the data, we probably could go ahead and start to create some metrics using DAX, the data analysis expression language, to be able to analyze the data that we have and to be able to have those metrics be able to calculate with inside of our data models. Let's go ahead and create some of those metrics here. I'm going to go back to the report view, and we're going to focus in on the tickets table for a little bit. Now, what some people like to do, and we just don't have time for this today, but what some people like to do is they'll create a whole separate table for storing their metrics. That's a great idea. It makes it easier for you to find the metrics. For interest of time, I'm not going to necessarily do that today, but I could have a separate table here devoted to just displaying the metrics, making them a little easier to find. But in our scenario, what I want to do is inside the tickets table, I want to start by getting a count of our tickets. So if I want to get a count of our tickets, I can right-click on the tickets table or hit the three dots, and I'm going to select to create a new measure. By creating a new measure, you're going to see the formula bar at the top of our screen, and I'm zooming in on it for you to make it a little easier. But in the formula bar at the top of the screen, we're going to create a metric called total tickets. And what we're going to do is we're going to simply count the number of rows that we have in our tickets table. Every row inside of our tickets table represents an individual ticket. So all we have to really do is count the number of rows there, and we'll know the number of tickets that we had. So we're going to use the count rows function. And using the count rows function, it'll allow us to count the number of rows in a table. Again, this works in this scenario because every row in the tickets table represents an individual ticket. So we're going to say count rows, and then we're going to tell it the table where we want to count the rows. To identify a table name, you'll use a single quote, and we're going to tell it that we want to count the tickets. All right, so that's the name of the table, and we're going to close that inside parentheses like so. Once you hit enter, that will create a new measure for you, which you can see over inside of your tickets table right here. There is our total tickets metric that we just created that we can now use with inside of our report. That total tickets measure is really going to be the basis for a bunch of other measures that we created. So we started with that one, but no, we're going to be creating a bunch of other ones, leveraging and using that total tickets measure as a starting point. All right, so what are some of the other things that we wanted to know? What's the average duration to close a ticket? That's a little bit more of a complex one, but let's see if we can figure that one out. So what I want to do for this one is we're going to create another new measure. I'm going to go back over to our tickets table here, hit the three dots, and select new measure again. Inside of our measures window here, our toolbar where we can provide our measure, we're going to call this one our average time to close, okay? And this one's going to be a little bit more complex. So I'm going to give myself a little real estate here. If you hold down Shift and hit Enter, that allows you to do a carriage return there. But what I want this one to do is we're going to take an average of the time to close a ticket. To determine the time, the duration between two dates, you can use a date diff function. But in addition to the date diff function, we want to know the average time. So we're actually going to start with a function called average x. And why average x is going to be important is because it allows you to iterate over multiple rows to be able to determine what the average is over a number of rows that you have. So there's some iteration that's happening here over your table. So we're going to use that average x function, all right? And then inside of the average x function, we want to filter to only show tickets that are actually resolved. So if there is no resolution to a ticket, we don't want to count that into our average because it could potentially throw off our average in theory. So I want to actually filter and only return tickets that have a resolved date. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and do a function called filter, and we're going to tell it that we want to filter our tickets table. So we'll tell it to filter our tickets table. And then essentially we want to filter it so as long as the resolved date is not blank. Now this is going to be a little bit of a funky lingo here with our DAX that we're going to write, but we're going to start with a not function. And then inside of the not function, we're going to use an is blank function. So we're essentially saying, is it not blank? And the column that we want to check to see if it's blank or not is our resolved date, okay? So as long as the resolved date is not blank, then we can continue forward. So I've added a bunch of closed parentheses there because we have kind of a bunch of nested functions, and I'll show you the full function here in just a moment. But we got a lot going on in here already, but you can see here what our filter is doing is it's saying filter the tickets table to only focus on the rows that have a resolve date. If the resolve date is not blank, then include it. All right, that's what's going on there. Now that we've got that, we can do our date diff. Our date diff is a date difference function. Give me the difference between two dates. So we're going to use a date diff function, and we're going to tell the difference between our two columns, our assigned date. So how long when did it get assigned to somebody? And then we want to tell the difference between the resolved date. So how long did it take for someone to actually resolve it once it was assigned to them? And I want to know in the number of hours. So we can actually say, tell me in number of hours how long it took for someone to resolve the ticket. All right. So a lot going on here. So just quick review. Filter to just bring back records that have a resolve date. Then give me the difference between the number of hours. But tell me in the number of hours how long it took from the time that someone was assigned a ticket to actually resolve a ticket. And I want to know the average. All right. So that's what we have going on with this one. A lot going on, a little bit of a complex one there for a newbie, but hey, that's okay. This is something to learn from and get you going here. So once you have that, you can go ahead and hit the check mark here, or you can hit enter. Either one will work. And it should add that new assign average total ticket closing here to your data view. Excuse me. Finally, the last couple ones I want to do here is I want to create two more, a little bit less complex measures. One's going to return back the open tickets, and then one's going to return back the high priority tickets. These are both going to be pretty important to me. So we're going to go ahead and create two more measures. We're going to go over to our tickets table and hit new measure again. And this one's going to be open tickets. All right. And we're going to use a function called calculate. I wish I could spend a lot of time explaining the calculate function, but essentially it allows us to take an existing measure like our total tickets measure we created earlier, and it allows us to have a filtered down view of the total tickets. So in this case, we're going to do, again, that is blank function. So basically, we're trying to check and see, has there been some kind of resolution? So I'm going to use the ticket table and the resolution column to see if there has been a resolution or not. If there is a blank value in the resolution column, then that means it should be still an open ticket. All right. So we'll go ahead and hit enter on this, or hit the check mark here if you prefer. But again, what we're doing is the calculate function is allowing us to return back total tickets, but filtering it to as long as the values, or as long as the tickets don't have a blank resolution. Blank resolution means it's still open. And I think I said that backwards. As long as it does have a blank resolution, which means it is open, then I want to count it towards total open tickets here. All right, so now that we have that, I'll go ahead and hit enter on that. We're going to create one more final measure. So again, we'll go back over to our data view over here on the ticket side, on the tickets table, and select new measure. And we're going to create one more here. We're going to call this high priority tickets. All right, this is going to be similar to our last calculation. We're going to use the calculate function again, and we're going to return back total tickets. Okay. And then I want to return back from total tickets, from the ticket table, I want to filter based on the priority column. So we have a priority column, and inside that priority column, I want to make sure, let's actually take this to the next line so we can read it a little better. I want to, on the priority column from the tickets table, I want to see where the values are in, and then we can use this little curly braces to tell it the items that are in a certain array of values here, or list of values. So I would say that if the value of the priority is either critical, that's pretty important. If it's critical or high, let me get that little thing out of the way there. If it's if the priority value is either critical or high, then I want to consider that a high priority ticket. All right. Once you have that, you can do a close parentheses there. And then that's our final measure, I think, that we're going to need for now. We might find some other ones that are useful later, but let's go ahead and create that for now. All right, now that we have those measures, we're able to start to build some report visuals and see if we can answer some of the questions that we have. I think we're going to start by creating a single view that gives us a little bit of a summary of all the tickets that we have, how many we have open, how many total tickets we have, give us the ability to do some filtering on the data here as well. So let's get started on actually building our first set of reports. So the first report that we want to look at is a ticket summary. I want to look at all kinds of metrics around the tickets, starting with something like the average close time for the tickets. That's a measure that we created a few moments ago, and I want to be able to see it. So I'm going to use, for looking at that one individual measure, I'm going to use a card visual right here. And that card visual is great at just displaying a single measure. So if I select or bring in the average time to close into that card visual, that will allow me to see a nice picture there of the total, or I should say the average time to close a ticket. So right now it's taking us almost 44 hours to close a ticket. And if you want to, you can rename that so that it's really clear that we're talking about hours. You can either rename the measure or you can rename it just on that one visual, and I can put some kind of label on it so it's clear we're talking about hours here. There we go, just like that. So what I did in this case was I renamed it just on the visual by just double clicking on the field within inside the visual. You can rename it just within the visual. The measure later on is still going to not include that, but you have the choice to choose to rename it just for the visual. All right, I want to add a couple other card visuals in here as well. Something like tell me the number of high priority tickets, the number of open tickets. We're going to use that card visual again for a number of these. In fact, I'm going to copy the one that we have here just so it keeps the same size. And you can just copy and paste by doing Control-C and Control-V. And I'm going to replace this measure this time. All I really wanted it was for the size. I'm going to replace this one with open tickets. So we have 9 open tickets. All right, interesting. All right, good to know. I'm going to copy and paste that again. And then this time we're going to switch out that measure. Instead of open tickets, I want to see high priority tickets. All right, so we have 58 high priority tickets right now. Okay, very interesting. Let's go add in one more, because this time what I want to see is the total tickets. I don't care so much about the high priority ones in this one. I want to see the total number of tickets that we have. We have a total of 250 tickets. I keep sliding this over to give us a little bit more real estate here. All right, looking good. Let's keep moving along here. I think there's some other things that we might want to do. In fact, something doesn't look right with this high priority one. That might be something for us to fix later. I think I might have maybe made a misspelling or something. We'll go back and see what that might have been. Let's see here. Did I misspell critical? Is that what I did wrong here? Critical. All right, because I was expecting that number to be a little, there it is. I was expecting that number to be higher. So little typo on my measure earlier. That happens when you're working on a project like this. Sometimes you'll look at the data and you'll need a eye of somebody that's familiar with the data working with you to know, oh, something doesn't look quite right about that. So there was a little typo on the word critical. Some of you probably spotted that before I did, but we fixed that now. All right, so now we're going to build out some visuals to help understand our data. So maybe I want to see a breakdown on the ticket priorities. So I'm going to bring in a bar chart here. And in this bar chart, I want to be able to see the total number of tickets by priority. Okay. So there we go. We got a nice little visual there showing us tickets by priority. All I did for that was I selected the bar chart. The bar chart visual found right here. And then within inside of the bar chart, I brought in the priority column and the total tickets. Okay, you can always slow me down if you need to see that, but you can see that is showing up on the X and Y axis here. All right, very good. Now let's see if we want to move on to something else. I want to see the total number of tickets by status. So just for a little variety here, we'll bring this in as a bar chart this time, or column chart this time. And for the column chart, what I want to bring into it is something similar. I want to see the total tickets again, but I want to see it by status this time. So I'll select status. All right, so that's interesting. So we're seeing the total number. We have a bunch closed. We have some resolved. We have some other statuses in here as well that are being utilized. But now we can see the total tickets by status. Finally, one thing else I want to do, I'm going to bring in one more visual here. Let's bring in a column chart again. And I want this column chart to show, again, the total number of tickets. But I want to see the total number of tickets by category. So this is actually kind of some categorization of the tickets. So you can see the feedback. It's a feedback one. It's a product-related one, an account-related one. But I want to see it by resolution. So one fun thing that you can do in Power BI is you can have what's called small multiples. So while I've created this bar chart here by bringing in the bar chart and then bringing in the category and the total tickets, one thing that you can also do is you can, if you wanted to, you could have this idea of the small multiples by bringing in the resolution column found right here into the small multiple section right here. And what that will essentially do is it will duplicate that column chart we're looking at by the number of resolutions that we have. So if I go ahead and select that, look at what happens here. Now we can see the number of closed tickets or total tickets by category and resolution. And if you scroll down, you can see there are different resolutions that are in here. If you wanted to see all of these at the same time, you can do that. I can go over to the format settings and I can actually change the small multiple settings here to increase the number of columns or the number of rows that are displayed at once. So if I increase it to show 3 at once, then we can see all of them on the screen here like so. So pretty cool. Small multiples is a fun little way to be able to display multiple values. Now, as we work with Power BI, we can certainly do filtering. I can do things like select the priority, and I can look at the high priority tickets here if I wanted to, the low priority, the critical ones if I wanted to. You can filter these by anything you want by just selecting the bars in the bar chart or the column chart, either one. Or we could also bring in a filter called a slicer. So a slicer filter right here allows us to be able to filter our data in a variety of ways, either by text, by numbers, by dates, all sorts of things that we might potentially want. So I'm going to bring in a slicer visual and I'm going to drop it in the top right-hand corner here. For that slicer visual, I want to be able to filter by date. And so I'm going to bring in the date column that we have. And this gives us a fun little slider that we can use to be able to filter based on when the tickets were created. So I can go in and I can adjust the filter. You'll notice as I adjust the date, it does adjust the number of tickets that we're looking at. I can always clear the filter here if I want to see all of them for the entire year. All right, looking good. Now, I like this report page we created. I'm going to go ahead and call this our ticket summary, and we're going to create a few other pages. We're going to do these next pages a little quicker. So again, this is YouTube. Feel free to pause, slow me down, do whatever you need to do to be able to see if you are following along. But I want to try and see if we can make that time. I don't even know what the time is right now. I can't see it. I'm just hoping I'm going to be under that 1 hour. So let's create a couple more pages here. This next page, I'm going to call this Tickets by Agents. Because again, remember, we have a couple questions that we need to be able to answer. So I need to make sure that I have these reports satisfying those questions that we have. So let's do a couple things around agents. I wanted to know which agents are getting the highest satisfaction scores, right? So let's start with something around satisfaction scores. I'm going to bring in a bar chart here. And in this bar chart, we're going to look at, let's say, our hierarchy. Remember, we created that hierarchy before. Let's actually use that hierarchy that's in our agents table now. So I'm going to bring in the team hierarchy right here into our bar chart. And because we're using that hierarchy, it brings in both fields at the same time. But I want to look at the agents by customer satisfaction. So I'm going to bring in the satisfaction scores here. Right now, the scores of the satisfaction scores are summing, but really I want to do an average of the scores. I should have made a measure with that. But what we can do instead is I can change that from a sum to an average here by simply clicking on that arrow and clicking average. All right, so now we're looking at an average of our scores. I expected the average to be in the 1 to 5 range here, so that looks good. So it looks like I have an average of 3.51 for account management and then billing support. Usually people aren't happy about billing when they're calling on that. It has a lower score. Now, if I wanted to, I could also drill in deeper and I can say, hey, I want to look at and do a drill down and I want to see those that are within inside of the billing support, who's getting the lowest scores. Looks like Maria Garcia is getting the lowest score, 2.27 in here as well. And I can always drill back up if I wanted to. But hey, maybe I really want to see this number. I want to see what that average customer satisfaction score is. So I could go to the format section over here if I wanted to, and I could actually tell it that I wanted to display the data labels, making it a little easier and a little cleaner to see what the actual value is on these. All right, pretty cool. You can always expand this. You can kind of do this hierarchy view if you wanted to. There's a couple things you can tinker with here if you wanted to. I like having the ability to drill down into any one of these particular values so I can drill in to see one of the teams and what the scores are for those teams. All right, so that answers that question around customer satisfaction and who has the highest, who has the lowest. If I wanted to, I can go drill and look at particular users. Let's keep it that way for now. What might also be interesting to know is not only the number of tickets that are opened by team, but how about the number of tickets that are then reopened again later? So let's create another chart here. This time we're going to do a cluster column chart. That's kind of a side-by-side chart here. And inside that cluster column chart, we'll move that up to the top right. And we're going to go ahead and add in the total number of tickets. We're going to also add in reopened tickets. And then I want to see that by our agent hierarchy. That hierarchy is coming in handy now, isn't it? Now, if we wanted to, you can kind of drill up. So you're looking just at the teams, or if you want to keep it drilled down, you can do that. But here I can see the number of tickets for each team, and then the number of tickets that are reopened. Looks like technical support, not surprising. That's probably the one that has the most reopened tickets, meaning a ticket was closed and then had to get reopened again later because it wasn't really resolved. All right. Now let's look at things from an individual agent level. I want to add in another bar chart this time. This will be a stacked bar chart. And inside of my stacked bar chart, I want to look at individual agents. So I'm going to bring in the agent name. And then I want to look at the total or the average, let's say the average close time by agent. So it looks like Robert Johnson is closing tickets fastest. Thomas Rodriguez is taking the longest. But I also want to know it based on the priority. So are the high priority tickets taking longer? Maybe Thomas has more high priority tickets. Looks like Robert gets a lot, actually gets not very many medium tickets. It might be just that Robert doesn't get many tickets at all. So I could add in another thing into the tooltip to see the total number of tickets if I wanted to. I could drag in total tickets into the tooltip section here. So that way when I hover above, I can see the total number of tickets that are represented by that average close time. So that's interesting as well. But this gives me a good depiction or a good understanding of what's going on with my data. We're running out of time here, I think. So let's do 2 more quick reports. If I go overtime, I go overtime, but I want to be able to see how fast and if we're able to solve this problem here. And I just don't have visibility into that timer, but I think I'm getting close. So this time, let's go ahead and look at tickets by customers. And so in this one, what I want to do is I want to build out some report visuals that help me understand my customers. So things like the customer segment. Let's look at the customer segment within inside of our customer table. So within inside of our customer table, we can close agents, we can close date now. I want to look at the total number of tickets that are generated by customer segment. There we go. So it looks like VIPs are generating the most tickets. Interesting. All right. I also want to be able to see in a bar chart this time, let's look at the total number of tickets by customer type. So which customer type is going to have the most tickets? So let's bring in our customer type, which is going to be, of course, in the customer table. I did a percent one here. This was the wrong kind of chart. I did the 100% stacked bar chart, common mistake. So all I have to do to fix that is instead of using the 100% stacked bar chart, let's flip it to the regular stacked bar chart. There we go. So now we can actually see the difference here. So it looks like nonprofits have the least amount of total tickets. The business side has the most. That's probably pretty expected there. So that's helpful to see. Maybe I want to know the number of tickets by channel. So let's go ahead and add in total tickets by channel. And let's use a different visual this time. Let's use something like the tree map. So the tree map is a representation of where these tickets are being generated from. Are they being generated from their phone call-in, an email, in person even? Wow, that's interesting. Maybe it's like a live chat or a web form. This is showing me the representation of each of the tickets and how they were submitted. So that's helpful to see. All right, looking pretty good. I could, if I wanted to, I could also bring in the satisfaction. So maybe we bring in the satisfaction score. I want to know perhaps how satisfied our customers are by segment. So, or maybe customer type. Let's do customer type here. So show me the customer type. Let's do it as a bar chart again. And maybe I want to see those data labels again. I like those data labels we had before. There we go. Now, as a reminder, this is right now by default summing the average satisfaction, but we want to change that to an average. Reminder of how we did that. Go to the x-axis and flip it to average. Looking pretty good. There we go. So now we can see the average score, satisfaction score that we're getting by customer type as well. Good stuff. All right. Now, just to kind of wrap things up, I want to do one more fun final report here. This one's going to be just to look at and evaluate open tickets. Maybe I have a manager that wants to look at the open tickets and how they're being worked and who's working on them and that sort of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one final report. We're going to bring in a simple matrix to start off with. Matrix is kind of like a table to look at your data. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's my Quick answer for that. And we're going to go ahead and bring in the hierarchy, the agent hierarchy. And I want to see not only the agent hierarchy, but let's look at the tickets that are open. So show me the open tickets. And let's see, do I want to see it by category? No, let's look at it by priority here. Okay. So I have the team hierarchy showing me the tickets that are open, what's the priority of those tickets, and if I want to, I can drill in and actually see which agents are working on those tickets. So you can kind of do a little bit more detailed view of the data here when you use the matrix visual. All right, one final thing I want to do that's a little bit fun is we're going to use this really fun visual called a decomposition tree. That's right here. And what's fun about the decomposition tree is it allows you to be able to drill deeper and deeper into your data. So if I bring in the decomposition tree, I'm going to make it take up a lot of real estate here. I want to look at and evaluate open tickets. So show me the open tickets, and I want to see what the category of those open tickets are. I also want to see what the priority of those open tickets are. And then finally, what's the current status? So what this allows me to do when I'm working with inside of a decomposition tree is I can drill into the data. I can kind of drill deeper and deeper and deeper into the data. And so if I expand open tickets, I can then look at, let's say, for example, the category. And then I can drill in even deeper. So I'm looking at the category of account maintenance here, basically. And I can drill in and look at the priority. And then I can drill in one step further and I can look at the status. So it allows me to drill into the data deeper and deeper. And if you wanted to switch, you can always kind of flip to a different one. Show me billing or show me product support. And you can keep drilling deeper and deeper into the result. So it's a fun way to be able to get a deeper understanding, but a more interactive way of viewing your data. Wow, we did a lot. Now, I'm curious to see what my time ended up. I might have gone over, I don't know, but hey, it was fun. You hopefully learned a lot. You saw beginning to end what you can do with inside of Power BI. We built several reports. We did some data ingestion in the beginning. We even were able to do some fun stuff around DAX briefly, created some relationships, and then again, finally, we built 4 separate report pages with inside of our solution. This solution I'm going to save, make sure it's available for you. If you learned a lot today, make sure you subscribe. I'm going to be doing some other videos like this, beginning to end, showing you what you can do with Power BI, but also make sure you take a look at our hackathons. Hackathons with Pragmatic Works are a great service that we have that is exactly like this, but it's with your data. So when we do hackathons with our customers, it's a training, but it's on your own use case where we work together on being able to solve and build out a solution in a short amount of time. Very similar to what we did here, but it's usually over the course of a day, maybe 2 days, depending on the scope of work. But it's a really helpful way to connect where you're not just looking at generic data, you're looking at data that's relevant to you. So make sure you take a look at our hackathons. Reach out if that's something that's of interest to you. All right, so we got this final report. We got lots of fun stuff that we were able to do with it. Hopefully you learned a lot in today's video. And again, look forward to more like this where we're going to build some end-to-end solutions in a short amount of time, showing you the thought process of what you need to be thinking about as you're building out your solutions on your side of the house, on your side of the screen, I should say. Again, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.